So I was talking to my little sister recently, and she said something I had never fucking heard before, and it didn't really make sense to me. She called me older brother core, and I was like, "Well, no shit, retard. I'm your older brother." Um, but I was aware of like cottage core and shit like that, so I assumed she was referencing some Zoomer shit, and I looked into it and I did some research on older brother core, and yeah, she's fucking right. I didn't realize I fell into a niche like that. But apparently, me and the boys are older brother core. It's really interesting that something that falls into like an archetype or this like stylistic choice was just normal shit for us. And honestly, like as an adult man, I've got band posters, fucking posters from the Goosebumps books, and I've got a big ass Halo 3 poster behind me right now. And I mean, it's just a bunch of stuff that I'm into and other people are into, so it's kind of funny. So this video is going to serve the purpose of introducing the Gen Z folk, the younger folk, dope ass video games and the importance of them. And for the rest of you that are over 30, this is for us to reminisce on shit that was better stylistically. A little preface to this video is going to be the 90s and how we got to where we were. And in the 90s, arcades were fucking king. And this was because the hardware was literally dedicated towards gaming. You had cabinets that could play games better than any console ever could, and they looked better at arcades than they did at home. And the first games that were ever really like super immersive were games like Time Crisis. You know, your controller was a gun and you pointed it at the screen and shot at shit. Like, that was kind of big. It was kind of a big deal. Then you had your racing games that had a steering wheel, pedals, a shifter, and you were sitting in an actual seat, like Sega Rally or Daytona USA. And all these games did eventually make it to console for the most part, but they looked worse and played a little worse, so there was still a reason to go to the arcade. The 90s were also the advent of the first, like, good 3D games. I mean, Super Mario 64 is probably one of the best 3D platformers of all time. You even had pretty badass multiplayer games like GoldenEye. Now, they hadn't quite figured out first-person shooters on console yet. It was still kind of a PC man's game with mouse and keyboard. But this is what we had. This was the most robust shooting that we had at that time. It was pretty fucking good. Thank you, Rare. And on the PC side of things, RTS kind of reigned king for a while. You had things like Age of Mythology and Age of Empires. You had StarCraft. You had the original Command and Conquers, which a lot of those did make it onto console, but they fucking sucked on console and they looked like dog ass, so they weren't amazing. We also had Diablo on PS1, but it kind of also sucked. But that was our only way to play fucking Diablo, so we took it like a champ and we played that shit. Now, I would argue in about the year 2000, video games started taking themselves a little more seriously. Things got quite a bit edgier, and they started marketing video games to a more grown-up audience. This is when games stopped being a toy for children and started becoming more of a way to pass the time as an adult or as a teenager. You can kind of see this reflected in the games that were coming out. Like, you had The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, which was a little bit darker than the rest of the series. You had Diablo 2, Deus Ex. And 2000 is when the first Sims came out. And back in the day, when you saw someone playing The Sims, it wasn't a teenage girl making her, like, fantasy family or drowning people in a fucking pool. It was, like, 80% older women playing it. Like, everybody I knew that played The Sims was, like, 55. The Sims was your best friend's mom's favorite game, but made competitive shooters what they are today. And you also had more artistic games coming out, like Jet Set Radio on Sega Dreamcast with cel-shaded graphics, weird-ass roller skating anime gameplay, and some really unique music that I still listen to this day. Now, the PS2 and the Dreamcast were definitely first to the punch, that being the Dreamcast especially, releasing in 1999. They were both kind of aiming for the same demographic and the same kind of quantity of games and the same culture. But just 1 year after the PlayStation 2 came out, another Japanese console hit the market, and that was the Nintendo GameCube. And GameCube had a different philosophy. Nintendo's always had the same philosophy, I feel like, of just pure game design. They just want to make functional games that are fun. They're not super worried about fidelity or anything like that these days. But when GameCube came out, I think almost every single cross-platform game I played on GameCube had a higher fidelity than like PS2. The games just looked a little bit sharper. Unfortunately, by the time the GameCube was released, the Dreamcast had already ceased production, snuffed out by the PlayStation 2, which is kind of crazy given that the Dreamcast was the better console. Around the release of the North American version of the GameCube, we also saw the release of the Xbox, a pretty competent competitor to the existing consoles at the time. It was more powerful. It boasted more features, and honestly, the only problem with it was the Duke controller's a giant piece of shit. It's unwieldy for human hands, and it was developed for a giant fucking alien. Shout out Mad Catz for popping out controllers that didn't suck so I could actually play my Xbox. And now the sixth generation console wars have officially begun, with the Dreamcast getting snuffed out basically before it even started by PlayStation 2. You had three consoles that served the same purpose but were for different people. You have the GameCube, which Nintendo did with every other console they've ever made. They geared it towards a younger, family-friendly demographic that was more geared towards young kids to maybe 10 to 13, or just the whole family as a whole. PlayStation at the time had a different marketing strategy. They were targeting a demographic more akin to teenagers and young adults, and focusing on more sophisticated and abstract games. And a big marketing device they used was the fact that they had a DVD player. This was something that was supposed to do everything for you in terms of entertainment. And to really drive home that this wasn't a toy for children, this was a console for teenagers and adults. What you're watching right now is a PlayStation 2 advertisement directed by David Lynch. They were trying to drive home that they were more artistic and more mature than a toy made by fucking Atari. And I guess they succeeded. I mean, they are the highest selling console of all time with over 160 million units, so I guess it worked. Now, Xbox took a really unique approach, in my opinion. They were looking for a way to bridge the gap between console and PC gamers. So what they did was they made a PC that just is a console. And while it also had a DVD player, it also had other features that you could get out of a home computer, like downloading things to a hard drive. It had a built-in hard drive at the time, at launch. And you could also burn discs with the fucking thing. It wasn't until a year later that we got Xbox Live and PlayStation Network for the first time. And before that, online gameplay, unless you had a PC and decent dial-up, was just your friend from school or your cousin sitting next to you on split screen. For the first time ever en masse, people were getting internet, and not just for their home computer, but for their consoles as well. This is the technology that took us from LAN parties and local competitions to just booting up your computer or your console and playing with strangers online. And you weren't playing to level anything up or unlock cosmetics. You were just playing to play the game. I mean, Halo 2 had ranks, but that was about it. They didn't mean anything other than a little emblem next to your name. We played games because they were fun. It was all for the love of the game. By 2004 to 2005, you had two major things happening. Online gaming was here to stay. Every year, more people were online, and more people wanted to be online. But that was reserved for people who had the luxury of internet and a newer console. And I think the industry was well aware of the fact that not everybody had that, and that was an untapped market. For those of us that didn't have internet, we had a slightly different focus on gaming. Unfortunately, at this time, simultaneously while online gaming was booming, you had a whole new explosion of cinematic experiences, more in-depth storytelling, games that at the time felt like movies. And I think this was really important for the time because it really pushed gaming into more of an art form. It was a lot harder to get parents and adults on board Showing an adult at the time a lobby where you just racked up a shitload of kills on fucking Halo 2 was a little unconvincing of gaming as an art form. But if you were to show them something like Metal Gear or Half-Life 2 or Shadow of the Colossus, they might be more convinced of the storytelling potential. When you didn't have internet, it was also a little bit unique getting information regarding games that were coming out. We relied on things like PlayStation Magazine that came with demo discs. They'd show off games in the magazine, you'd pop the demo disc in, and you'd have dev diaries about the game they were making, and you could play the games that were going to come out soon. This was also a time where Game Informer magazine was super important. I still, to this day, have a box of Game Informer magazines that I could barely fucking pick up. I got so many of the goddamn things. Side note, I remember reading about Robert Space Industries and Star Citizen back in like 2012. What the fuck? And if you didn't have access to those magazine subscriptions, you were even more shit out of luck because you were basically limited to the little kiosks in different game stores. And it's not like you could pick the game that was getting advertised at the time. And then other than that, you just pick a game up off the shelf, look at the front, look at the back, pull the manual out and go, ah, this looks pretty tight. Now, fortunately, the majority didn't have to live in the dark ages for super fucking long. Eventually, they started passing out internet everywhere like the shit was free, and guess what? It's not dial-up anymore. This shit is a coaxial connection. That's right, baby. I'm talking dedicated Wi-Fi internet. Not that bullshit your parents were using that ran off the motherfucking telephone. There was also DSL and satellite, but we won't talk about that. No, DSL does not stand for dick-sucking lips. Now it's around the range of 2005 to 2007, and shit's changing. PlayStation releases the PS3. Don't get too confused, it's not the PlayStation 2. And the Xbox released the Xbox 2. No, wait, that would make too much sense. They released the Xbox 360. And Nintendo decided to reinvent the wheel once again by releasing the Wii. Now, Sony and Microsoft are now in direct competition because they chase essentially the same demographic. They've both pivoted towards video games as a lifestyle and a hobby, and for whatever reason, Nintendo decided to go after the fitness crowd. All in all, however, the Wii is still just a fun for the whole family home entertainment system. Pretty much everything that launched with the PlayStation and the Xbox were cross-generational games like Call of Duty 2 and Call of Duty 3, all of your Maddens and your NBA games. Not really a lot to write home about. Pretty much no reason to get these consoles for the first year or two of release other than 1080p, which most of us really didn't fucking have, I feel like. The PS3 did have a Blu-ray player, though, which was pretty fucking awesome. But in all honesty, these consoles really didn't pick up and become fucking amazing until about 2007, 2008. 2007 saw releases like Halo 3 and Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. This was the game that propelled online multiplayer to the fucking moon. This is also around the time that YouTube was really picking up steam, as was Machinima. So not only were you playing games with strangers and having a really good time, games now had progression and things to work towards. And with YouTube and Machinima, you now had people making other content with video games. And you also had micro-celebrities within your own gaming sphere. And this was before anybody was really making any money doing that sort of thing. And you had content creators like Only Use Me Blade and Woody's Gamertag making Call of Duty content. The Drunken Gamers, who went on to become Rooster Teeth, were then making their own machinimas, Red versus Blue. This was the beginning of Let's Play content as a whole, also. Now, back then, matchmaking wasn't really much of a thing unless you were playing some game with a ranked component. So a lot of games, especially fighting games and shooters, you sat in lobbies or rooms all night with the same guys playing with each other for hours on end, and you really didn't rotate out very many people. This made it a little bit easier to make friends and long-time, like, online gaming buddies. The shit-talking was on point, there were no holds barred, and what made it even better was everyone's mic sounded like dog shit. Games were now legitimized as an art form and a really good source of revenue for a lot of these entertainment companies. The financial side of things is where you start to kind of see a shift. Now, people pretty consistently tout Oblivion as having like some of the first DLC or like Call of Duty map packs or booster packs in Battlefield 2. But truthfully, expansion passes and things like that have been in gaming since the 90s. It's just you got something pretty tangible out of it typically. Oblivion's egregious act as an experiment was the horse armor for $2 that did fucking nothing though. These kind of experiments are what led to what we have today, where you have stupid ass DLC that's just an armor set that costs as much as the game does. But live service and microtransactions aren't really what I have a problem with in today's gaming. Now, back then, we didn't have a lot of live service other than things like WoW, and like RTS has had a lot of expansions and things like that. RPGs had good expansions. Back then, we had a finite number of good games, and if you didn't have internet, you had even less games to play. And the games you owned weren't vying for 100% of your attention all the time. You took the fucking disc out, and all of a sudden it didn't call to you anymore. Modern gaming is something that I can only describe as overwhelming. Now, with my old man take aside, gaming is at a better place than it's ever been. Great games are coming out every single month. The problem, I guess, at this point is we don't have enough time humanly possible to play all of them. Now, you do have a lot of stinkers out there like Ashes of Creation, fuck you, Intrepid, eat my whole ass. But gaming is at a good place in retrospective. And if you're going to have any takeaway from this video, besides liking and subscribing and commenting, of course, those things are so important, go ahead and play some good-ass games.